Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Black Men Matter series on the male perspective. The podcast that's all about dispelling stereotypes and shining a light on the rich and varied experiences of Black men from all around the world. Each episode aims to broaden understanding and foster appreciation for their unique stories that often go unheard. Now, here is your host, Lana Reed, to introduce you to yet another remarkable Black man with an insightful perspective to share.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Male Perspective. I am your host, Lana Reed, and today, on this day, I have the pleasure of sitting down with a gentleman by the name of 𝗵𝗫. He is an author, educator, mentor, and the guy behind a very impactful organization called Hattie's Child that's doing some phenomenal work in our young people and our Black communities. And I'm looking forward to spending some time with him today, learning more about the work that he's doing. But first and foremost, as I always do, sir, I take a quick moment to pause. Say thank you to you for making time for me today. Time is a gift. Once we give it, we can't get it back. So I truly appreciate you setting aside this time of your day to chat with little old me. And with that, sir, welcome to the show.
Well, I am honored to be here. And I mean that. You know, when I received the invitation, it was quite an honor. And so I thank you for the work that you are doing. I thank you for thinking enough of me to invite me to be a part of this. So I'm excited and really, it's a very sincere honor for me. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to jump right in because I got a short amount of time with you today, and I got a lot of information I want to get from you today. But the first thing I want to ask you, sir, Hattie's Child, that's a very interesting name. Can you tell us the meaning or what's behind that name, Hattie's Child?
I'm Hattie's child.
Okay. Mama's making mama proud, huh?
I'm Hattie's child. And when I decided to start with that name, because I'd been doing the work before I started using that name, but that name came to me. The first business that I started was 𝗵𝗶𝗀 Educational Services. And then I evolved into Hattie's Child, but I'm Hattie's child. My mother has made transitions, you know, but she was just a wonderful, wonderful mother and a wonderful, wonderful example, even of what I'm doing. She supported all of the work that I was doing, even before she transitioned. She knew that I was about helping Black folks, and she supported that, you know. And even when I go back to the things that she did to support me, even as a child, to put me on this path and support me, you know, when I wanted. I'm old enough that when I was a child, they were still reading the encyclopedia, you know.
I remember that, yeah.
Okay, and I remember the encyclopedia salesman coming by door to door selling World Book Encyclopedia, and I remember my mother looking at me and said, "Do you want them?" And I said, "Yeah," you know. And I was this little boy who loved to read, and she made it happen, you know. And so I would read, even as a child. I would read the encyclopedia. I would read myself to sleep, you know. But I wanted to know. I had questions, you know. I wanted to know why Black people, why we had been put into slavery. I just wanted to know. And so I started reading the encyclopedia. And then I remember salesman came by again selling a different set of encyclopedia. And Mama looked at me and she said, "You want him?" And I said, "Yeah." And she bought that. And then the last part I add to that is that they came by with Ebony magazine had put out this 3-volume set called Ebony's Pictorial History of Black America. And I remember the salesman came by again, door to door, selling it. And Mama looked at me and said, "You want it?" And I said, "Yeah." And she bought that for me. So she actually, you know, so she supported my work, put me on this path. And so I didn't think there was a greater honor than to include her name. And she was an example of someone who she understood her purpose in life, which is one thing that I stress a lot in the work that I do, is helping our children, especially, to identify their gifts and their talents and the purpose for which those gifts and talents are to be used. And my mother, she understood her purpose in life. And you know, it wasn't talked about and defined like it is now, but she just knew that, hey, this is what I do, right? And so she used her gifts and her talents to make a positive difference in the lives of our families and neighbors and friends and everything. And so I'm just kind of following in that example that she set.
Oh, making her proud. That's beautiful. I like that. So you mentioned in that you actually started this, I think I heard somewhere like in the 90s before you named it Hattie's Child. What was going on? Because, serving, pouring back into our communities is no easy feat. And so, it really takes something to say, hey, I think I'm going to go out here and mentor some young people. What was the motivation drive behind that?
Well, that's a great question. So one is that, and again, I'm going to come back and say that I think we all have a purpose in life, right? And I think what we do is we go through life. One, if we can identify that purpose, then we find different vehicles that we use to help us to fulfill that purpose. So I knew as a child that, as I was saying earlier, that I was really, really just enthralled and concerned about Black folks, and just had an insatiable appetite wanting to know more. So how the mentoring program and some of the work came about, one, I became a parent. And so with my children, one of the things that we did before I actually started my first business is myself and some other people, we operated an independent school for about 5 years. I met some sisters, matter of fact.
Okay.
And they had this idea of doing an independent school. And we met and we came together and we started this Afrocentric school basically right in our home. Okay. But we were teaching our children. And so we did that, and we were so independent. We didn't want any funding from anybody because we didn't want anybody to tell us what to do.
Tell us what to do.
But that became very challenging financially. So the school existed for about 5 years. And from there, I was asked to come in and start doing a lot of work with parents and teachers and put together workshops and seminars. And it was all about the positive development of the Black family. And I guess even before that, myself and some brothers had come together and we had started a mentoring program. And so that was, I have a son and a daughter. My wife and I had a son and a daughter. So our son was about 6 or 7 years old. We had him in this first mentoring program. Then I started another mentoring program, which is the one that exists now. It's called From Black Boy to Black Man, What Does It Take? And that question is, what does it take for our boys to make the transition to what I like to call true manhood?
Yeah,
and so I started that program in 1993. And I was just inspired to start the program. At that time, my son was, I guess, about 12 then. And so I grabbed him and some of his friends, and I would pick them up every evening, and we would meet and we would do this program. And then it just grew from there. And I wrote a curriculum for it. And it became very, very successful. And so I've taken that particular program all over the country, really, because I've trained other men how to administer the program as well. 2014, I think, is 100 Black men recognized the work that I was doing, called me and told me I had earned the Chairman's Award for mentoring leadership. And I remember getting the letter and not believing it was true at first. But so I've been doing that since 93, since around, I guess 1990 was the first time I actually started doing workshops for schools and social service agencies and just educating them on the Black family.
Okay.
And trying to change the perspective of teachers, as far as their expectations for Black children, and also, the different learning styles that we have. And just seeing us as human beings.
Yes.
And so I started doing that work, and that work took off, and it has just continued to this day. And then I developed a workshop entitled Helping Black Children Reach Their Full Potential. And that workshop turned out to be my most successful workshop. And so people kept asking me, said, well, why don't you put that information in a book? And so that led me to writing a book by the same title and deciding to publish it myself. So that also was my foray into the publishing business as well, because I published a book and other people asked if I could help them publish theirs. So I started a different company called Protective Hands Communications, which is publishing, book publishing. But I wrote the book Helping Black Children Reach Their Full Potential, and it focuses on the 7 keys to developing the genius that's inherent in all Black children. And I'm really, really a stickler for understanding that our children come into this world with genius potential, and that it's our responsibility as the adults in their lives, parents, teachers, the community, to nurture them so that they can reach their full potential. And so that's a big part of what I do, is working directly with parents and giving them the tools to help their children reach their full potential, because I know that a big part of what happens to our children is that they go in the wrong direction oftentimes when they're not able to say yes to what it is they really want to do, you know, because we all have gifts and talents and we all have a purpose in life. And so it's all about helping our children to identify those gifts and talents, which I always tell parents oftentimes, and stop me whenever you want, okay? But children literally will tell you why they are here if you listen to them, okay? Especially when they're young, before they have been polluted by the world, so to speak.
Yes.
They'll tell you, they know why they're here. And then they will show you their gifts and their talents. And again, like I said, our job is to nurture them and so that they can develop those gifts and talents and fulfill their purpose. Oftentimes we don't know how to do it, or oftentimes our children have such big dreams, and we as the adults oftentimes kill those dreams.
Yes.
You know, and we don't think that they're capable of achieving what it is that they are set out to do. So I just want to make a positive difference in the lives of Black folks. You know, I tell people that I love Black people, you know, and I make no apology for that.
None.
You know, and it's an unconditional love, you know, and so that's what I do.
Awesome, awesome. Well, you said a whole bunch of amazing things, and I want to backtrack on something that you mentioned, if I can get you to elaborate on it, because I think a lot of people don't really understand, especially in this educational system that we have here in America. But you mentioned that you originally opened a Afrocentric school program with some sisters. And I think I read on your website that your mentoring program does not subscribe to a Eurocentric model. And it's very important. And I think people don't understand, our children, our Black children really don't thrive under this Eurocentric model. And I was wondering if you could elaborate why it doesn't resonate with our Black children, this traditional American educational structure that we have in place.
Well, I think one of the first things is, I remember there's a great teacher, Dr. 𝗵𝗃 𝗃𝗃, that I used to listen to a lot.
Kwanzaa.
Back in the 90s and early 2000s. And he's still around, you know, but we don't hear from him as much as I would like to. But anyway, one of the things that he always talked about was, are you trained or are you educated? And so one of the problems that we have with the school system is that the school system really is a training ground as opposed to educating our children. And education, the root of it is to bring forth that which is within. So what we understand as African people is that everything that we need has already been deposited in us. And that's why I say that it's all about nurturing and just bringing forth that genius that's already there. So the school district is more about training than it is about educating our children. So it doesn't speak to their interests. It doesn't speak to their experiences. It doesn't speak to, like I said, their learning styles. Oftentimes, you have schools that are set up where you take little boys and you just want to sit them in a desk and make them stay there for hours on end, and that's not natural for them. And so they act out, and then next thing you know, there's a label affixed to them, when really there's nothing wrong with them other than the educational system in the classroom wasn't conducive to their learning. So one of the things that I find, that when you work with Black children, that again, like I said, they learn through observation, they learn through participation, and we don't often incorporate that. The other thing is that our children are a lot sharper than we give them credit for, so we need to allow them to participate in the educational process. which again, we don't do that enough. And I remember also the other thing is that I've worked with a lot of children, and one of the things that they need to see when it comes to reading, for instance, they need to see books with characters that look like them, people that look like them, and stories that they can relate to. I remember doing some volunteer work years ago at a school that was predominantly Black, but it had predominantly white teachers. And these students were struggling. I mean, they were struggling. They weren't reading. They weren't doing well. And I remember going in, this is elementary school, and I remember going in with 4 or 5 books about them. And they would read, I would read to them, they would read to me. And the teacher, the white teacher, she was amazed at how well they were reading and paying attention. And I told her, I said, it's because these are stories that they can relate to. Okay. They see people that look like them. Even the food that they talk about is the food that they eat. You know, the mothers that sound like their mothers and sound like their fathers. So they're relating to it. So the school system, it needs to be a system that our children can relate to. Here in Florida right now, we're still fighting. Well, we fought for so long to get the school systems to teach African and African-American history. And now we have a governor who's doing everything that he can to take it out of the school system. It was never fully implemented in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, and so what little was done, he wanted to take that out, right? But I always say this, and I guess I can wrap it up with saying this: the educational process needs to be relevant. And so when it's not relevant, the children are not going to respond to it. You know, children ask the most powerful question in the world, and that is why.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, think about that, right? You know, every child, you know, you tell them, come in before it gets dark. Why? You know what I mean? I don't have a problem staying outside playing with my friends. So why? You know? And so children, they are asking that question, why, even if they're not verbalizing it. So when you tell them that they need to study this topic, that subject, why? How is it going to impact their lives? You know, show me how this is going to impact my life. If a little boy wants to be a football player, he knows that that's what he wants to do. So when it's time for football practice, he understands why he's going to football practice, because this is going to help him become a better football player, because he wants to get to the NFL. But why am I taking geometry? You know, and why am I studying English or English literature or whatever? And, you know, even like I said, even if they're not asking it verbally, they're thinking it, you know, make it relevant. And so even like with my mentoring program, and I'll say this real quickly. I have a mentoring program. I have a workbook. So when I bring in these boys, they're 12 to 18 years old, and we come in and we're in a classroom style setting while we're doing this work. As we're going through the workbook, I'll see someone raising their hand. Why is your hand up? They want to know, can I read next? You know, can I read? So we're reading through this workbook, and sometimes their hand is up just because they just want to read one paragraph, you know, and then I'll go and another young man wants to read the next paragraph. The point though is that oftentimes when they read, they struggle to read, but because the school system has just pushed them along. Okay, so these are middle and high school students, but at the same time, they're raising their hand to read because the subject matter is relevant.
Gotcha.
They're relating to what we're talking about. We're talking about Black boys, young Black men. And so everything in that workbook, they can relate to. So they get excited about it, and they forget about how they struggle to read because they're excited about reading out loud in front of their peers about subject matter that they can relate to. So the school system has done a poor job of making the educational process relevant for our children.
And, you know, we keep on preaching this message year after year after year. You would think that the school system light bulbs would come on and understand, but it just seems to be they're dragging their feet on in certain communities, I guess I should say, making it more relevant to the students that are actually sitting in the classrooms, you know, and I just wonder why.
Yeah, I think that so my take on that is that the school system really does not have a commitment to properly educating our children because they can do better if there was a commitment to do better. Okay. There's been too many people that came long before even you and I that talked about the school district and its shortcomings and how it could be better. And so it's not like they don't know. You know, they just, I think I'm gonna shift and just say this. I think that we have to acknowledge that we do have this system of white supremacy. And the system of white supremacy does not allow for the proper education of Black children because the system of white supremacy is designed to maintain the status quo. It's designed to keep Black people as a whole in a second-class position. And true education liberates us from that. And so if the school system is a part of that system, if it's one of those institutions that works to maintain the status quo, then no, there won't be a true commitment to educating Black children.
That's why we need you to open back up some more Afrocentric schools, because you know, I think that's when we were the most empowered with our education, is when we were in our own school systems. But you know, that's a whole different conversation there. We go back to that. Is segregation, separation, was it better for us or not? But you know, that's a whole different, but we were better educated. I think the quality of education was better.
We were.
Let me shift, because I see I can spend some time with you today, and I want to not take up too much of your time. You have a
I'm on your time.
Okay.
I'm on your time.
Okay. So you have also in the work that you do, you have a summer program, an academic summer program. And I'm of the age where it was a given. When school was out, you were going to go to summer camp, or you were going to get a little part-time job or something. That was just a given in my generation. But fast forward to today, it seems like kids have some options when it comes to summertime, and they are given the time to just sit at home. Can you speak to the devastation, the detriment of not keeping a child engaged when school is out? Why do they need to be enrolled in these academic camps and such?
So that's a great question. So how I got involved is when I first got involved with academic summer camps, the city that I live in, like I was mentioning to you before we got started, is a predominantly Black city, Riviera Beach, down in here in Florida. And so they wanted to put together an academic summer camp for middle school students. And that's a very interesting demographic, let me say, because one of the things that we have found is that when the summer comes, there's a lot of camps for the young children. The high school students, the 16, 15, 16, 17, they're old enough to get summer jobs. And then you have that middle school age, that 12, 13, 14-year-old who is really left idle. So we put together an academic summer camp for middle school students. And so what we found when we do the summer camps is that when they go into the new school year, their grades go up because they get some academic reinforcement during the summer. The other thing that we find is that actually even crime goes down, because when young people are just, you know, when you don't have anything to do, you do some things you have no business with.
Idle hands, right?
That's right, exactly. So we found that it would, and how we did the camp was very unique, because we would hire teachers, certified teachers, and they don't do a lot of, school districts don't do a lot of summer school anymore. So the teachers, they were happy to have summer employment as well. So we would have certified teachers teach the students. We would hire high school and college students to serve as counselors, so we could create jobs for them and let them be role models for the middle schoolers. And then we'd have an opportunity for the middle schoolers to get some academic reinforcement. So we could look at where they were weak because we would have access to their academic records. We'd look at where they were weak. We could focus on those things, as well as doing a lot of exciting, fun, and educational field trips and different things like that. I do a class, Introduction to Entrepreneurship, where we teach young people about becoming entrepreneurs. And we do that in the mentoring program with the boys as well. And so we would do this, class, and we would have our little Shark Tank competition, and they would develop business concepts. And so they would learn about business, which is something else that's very important, because so many of our children have a natural desire to be entrepreneurs, to be their own boss. And as you may have mentioned, in my prison reentry program, I find that a lot of the guys that wind up in prison is because they really had a desire to be their own boss. And not knowing how to go about it, they took a path that led them to the penitentiary, but really the path that they were looking for was one that allowed them to be their own boss. And so the summer camps are very, very important. And I work with municipalities or schools and helping them to develop these summer camps. We create the curriculum and everything for the young people. And like I said, we can hire local teachers and students that live in the community as well. So it's very rewarding and very productive. And parents love it, because for those 6 weeks during the summer, they know where their children are.
They know, yeah.
And they know that they're in a productive environment for 6 weeks, getting, like I said, some academic reinforcement and having a lot of fun, because it's summer camp. So we try to make sure that they have a lot of fun as well. So typically what we do is we'll do the academics the first part of the day, and then we do more fun activities the second part of the day. And then we'll take Friday, and then we go on field trips and just have a good time. Awesome.
Yeah, because I see so many young kids today just sit the whole summer out on the couch and just being unproductive. And I said that, we can't have that. That's just, they need to be poured into something positive and productive. So, I was really tickled to see that program. Now, you mentioned your prison reentry program. That's a whole different segue from mentoring young people. How did that come along?
So, all right. So I'm going to be totally honest and transparent with you. So it came about two ways. One is that I'm one of three children. My oldest brother, like so many people who will hear this podcast, my oldest brother got caught up in drugs and was in and out of prison.
Okay.
So that helped me to be able to identify with men that was going to prison. But it was also just part of my natural desire to want to reach our people. And as some people like to say, the least of these, the ones that people forget about, And so I was invited one time to speak in a prison. And then from there, I said, I really want to develop a full program where I can go into prison and work with these young men. And so I was blessed to be able to have a couple of prisons down here in South Florida. We have plenty of prisons in Florida, because they don't mind incarcerating our people.
When they set us free, they found a way to keep us in chains,
It is just another form of slavery. That's what it is, right? And so I remember a good friend of mine who worked in the prisons. He says the modern day slaves on the modern day plantation, So I've been able to go into the prisons and work with those men who are incarcerated. And I'm glad you asked about that, because what I find, and I want people to really understand this, the best of our men are behind the wall, as his brothers like to say, the best of our men. I tell people all the time, the most voracious readers I've ever met are in prison. And the first thing people tell me, and this goes back to what we talked about earlier, first thing people say, well, the reason they read so much is because they got a lot of time on their hands. And I say, no, the reason they read so much is because they're reading stuff now that's relevant to them. Back to what we were talking about a minute ago. So they're reading books now that they can relate to, that's relevant, that means something to them. So these same men who probably flunked out of school, probably stopped caring about school when they were 10, 12 years old, are now reading a 300-page book in a week, you know. And it's not because they just have a lot of time. Yeah, that helps, you know, but they're reading it because it's relevant. So it's an educational process for me, because I tell everybody that when I go into the prisons, I learn as much from them as they learn from me. Same thing when I work with the boys in my mentoring program. I learn as much from them as they do from me. So I have a lot of men now that I've worked with in prison that are now home, who are now husbands, fathers, business owners, and mentors, you know. So I'm able to bring them into schools. And let me tell you, when I bring those brothers to come and talk to those 12 and 13-year-olds, you could hear a pin drop. Okay, I'm fighting to get their attention, but when them brothers come and they have those stories to tell, those young brothers are on the edge of their seat. So now they have become mentors, you know. And I mean, guys who did 20 and 25 years in prison, and, you know, who've come home now and earned college degrees, and, like I said, started businesses. I had one of the guys that I worked with in prison. He said, "Mr. White," he said, "I think you were like that father who just came to get your sons," you know. And I say, yeah, you know. So I come into the prison, and again, like I said, I learn as much from them as they do from me. But it's so rewarding. It's so rewarding. And you know, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking, because I've been at this podcast thing for a while. I've been talking to brothers here and there, north, south, east, and west. And there are reentry programs across the United States. And sometimes they just don't have the impact. They're not as successful as what
Right.
you've experienced. Why do you think your program is so successful?
So I think one is because, now I know I'm going to say this again, but one is because God prepared me to do this work. Okay. And so that I would not be truthful if I did not say that. He prepared me to do this work. So when I go in, I've never been in prison. I've never been, you know, incarcerated. But I know God gave me, when I work with those guys, it's like he gives me exactly what to say to them. So God prepared me to do this work. That's one thing. One of the things about our people, especially, well, all people really, but one of the things about our people is that, you know, we are spiritual people, so we feel your spirit. Okay, we feel your spirit. So those guys know that my love for them is genuine. They know that I'm there because I love them. And so I talk to them, and I also listen to them. You know, I listen to them, I hear them. And so I listen to them. Like I said, I learn from them. So I think what has allowed me to be successful is they know I'm coming from the heart. They know that my love for them is genuine, but I don't play games with them either. You know, but like the man said, he said, "You're like a father coming to get your son." So when I have to talk to them like a father would talk to his sons, I do, you know, but they know it's coming from a position of love. And they know that love is genuine, you know, that it's unconditional. But we talk about what we do in my mentoring in the reentry program is all about getting to the root causes. Because I think one of the reasons why mentoring programs aren't successful either is that you don't address the root causes of their incarceration. The root cause is not the crime that they committed. The root cause is what led to the crime. What was the, you know, the thinking that caused them to turn to that life in the first place. So we deal with the root causes of their incarceration, because I told them from the very beginning, I said, the objective is for you to leave this penitentiary and never come back. Okay. And so with that, we're going to deal with the root causes of your incarceration. What brought you here? What happened to you that got you here? So we deal with that. And I create an environment where they feel comfortable enough to talk about it and to be honest. And so we talk about, you know, what led them to the crimes that they committed in the first place. And, you know, and I don't play games with them. You know, I do not play games. I did not go in there from a position of fear. I went in there because I knew that I was sent to them. And so they know when I come, you know, they look forward to me coming. They have, you know, when you're doing it for the right reasons, the other men, they when I show up, they round up the other men. Hey, they let them know that, hey, that I'm here, let's go. They take over, and but it's from a position of love. So again, I referenced Dr. 𝗪𝗪𝗃𝗃 earlier, and I'll say this and I'll stop. One of the things he always said is that if you don't love them, you shouldn't teach them. Okay. And so it's the same thing when I go into the prison or when I'm mentoring those boys or working with parents or whatever. If you don't love them, you shouldn't be doing the work, because that is the foundation right there, is the love.
That's right. And I would assume that that particular population is going to be very quick to sniff out whether or not what your motives are, what your intentions are.
Yes. Yes.
So you only work with them while they're incarcerated, or do you also work with them after they're released?
Oh no! Once they come home, we stay together. Yeah, we stay together and work. Like, that's why I was saying a lot of them have become mentors because they worked with me. They pledged that they would become a mentor when they came home. So we stay together. I get to know their families, their wives, their mothers, their fathers. So yeah, so we stay together and we continue to work together. They continue, they know that they can call me when a crisis comes about, because when they get out, it's not just all peaches and cream. They still got to deal with the fact that they are a convicted felon, and they're still trying to navigate their way through a hostile environment, which again is why I love you for your love for Black men.
Y'all
because
awesome.
So I try to stay in touch with them as much as possible and continue to work with them and support them. Sometimes we just go to lunch together, or they'll come by the house and we'll just sit and just chop it up like that, and then some of them, like I said, they are now involved in prison reentry as well. So I've seen them that have just taken the lead. Yeah.
Paying it forward. Florida, felons can vote now. What was the law there with that?
So Florida said, okay, because for years they said felons couldn't vote. Then they said, okay, they passed this law, said felons can vote, except I think, there were certain crimes that if you had committed, you couldn't vote. Then when these felons thought that they were now free to be able to go to vote, they threw another caveat in it. So now they said if you had any fines or anything that you had accumulated, you're going to have to pay all of these fines. And in other words, they were just looking for ways. We have a Republican legislature, Republican governor, races really, and they were looking for ways to circumvent that law. They did not want to see felons vote, so they went and found another way to stop them. And so that's when they came up with, if you have any outstanding fines or just a whole bunch of little nitpicking stuff. Basically,
yes,
yeah,
the poll tax.
Basically, yes. That's exactly right. Just a 21st century version of it, So you're right, sister. You're exactly right. So so that was all about keeping these convicted felons, from being able to vote. So they're still challenging them with that. Yeah.
Yes. Not to get into it, but Florida is a very interesting place politically. So
it is. It really is.
And historically, I think if I'm recalling correctly, for us as Black folks, the first settlement for us is down there in Florida. So Florida has a lot of rich history for us as a Black community.
Florida has a lot of rich history. Florida really is probably three states in one, And I was telling you earlier that I'm down in South Florida, where our population is a lot of people, white folks that came from the North with money. And they came to South Florida to make it a winter playground. So they didn't want anything progressive happening here. They didn't want industry and good jobs per se to take place here, because they made their money in the North, and then when they would come south, it was, like I said, for it to be a winter playground. And so that their influence has really hurt the progress of Black folks in South Florida. Then in North Florida is more like South Georgia, South Alabama.
Okay.
So it's a totally different environment. So, but yeah, down in Southeast Florida, Miami, Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, all of that, it's a lot of wealth here, and then there's a lot of poverty. So it's like a tale
Two
of
extremes.
two cities. Yeah. Yep.
Two extremes. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. If you drive through Florida, like you said, if you hit the top, you're like, okay, and then you go down a little bit, you're like, oh, okay, so
Right,
you
right.
you see the transition.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's beautiful with the beaches and palm trees and everything. I love it. I mean, and I love warm weather, so works for me.
Yeah, awesome. I'm gonna ask you one more question, and then I'm before I let you go, I think, and then I'm asking my random question. I want to circle back to your mentoring program because I didn't get to it. It covers quite a few topics, and I want everybody to know some of the topics that you cover with the young people so they can know everything that it encompasses. Or I know you said entrepreneurship, but there's some skill sets that the young people walk away from when they go through your program. I was just wondering if you could run through.
So I'm going to hold up and show you that we have this workbook from Black Boy to Black Man. This is the book helping Black children reach their full potential. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and we have the website Hattie'sChild.com. So I want people to go there if they want to get more information about the work that we do. So with the mentoring program, yeah, we deal with self-esteem and self-respect. We deal with their history and culture. We deal with critical thinking skills. How to be successful in school, both from an attitude as well as practical things that you can do in the classroom to be successful. We deal with money management and entrepreneurship. We also deal with health and nutrition. And we also deal with how to set goals, how to achieve them. And I think something that you said earlier when we were preparing for this show is also talking to them about time management. It's one thing you're not going to get back. Like I tell them, you can lose your money and get your money back, but you're not going to get the time back. So we talk to them about all of those things, and we go in depth with them. We have a lot of exercises. It's a interactive program. It's not me lecturing to these young men. It's them going back and forth. And so you get to really, really hear from them. So we talk about the characteristics of a real man, and then we explore those characteristics, and we explore, why don't we see more real men? What happened to us? We talk about even using the word nigger, because I talk to them about the power of the spoken word. That you are what you speak. And so we explore it from a historical point of view, though, and so then we get them to see the language that they use and how your actions start to be reflected in your language, and vice versa. So it's all about getting them to think, getting them to make good decisions. We deal with anger management. We deal with their value system. We deal with the messages that they get from the music and just from the media in general, how we are portrayed in the music, how we're portrayed in the videos and everything. We get them to deal with that. And like I said, we get them to talk about, how to pay yourself first and what is of value to you, what's important. Do you take your money? For instance, I give them two words that we talk about a lot, which is appreciation and depreciation. So we talk about those things that you can put your money in that will appreciate in value, and those things that will depreciate in value, so just basic core lessons. And then we do where they actually have to identify their career goals, and then we talk about the requirements to get there, because like I tell them, you can't just wish it into existence. You've got to have a plan. So now if you say you want to do this, let's look at the plan. What are the requirements? How many of those requirements have you already met? So how long is it going to take you to get there? So, and it could be basic requirements. It could be big. It could be small. It could be, I just need to start passing my grades in school, because even if they say that they want to be athletes, for a lot of the boys, I don't discourage that, but I make them look at it realistically. You know, I make them look at, okay, so here are the odds of you becoming
how many are in actually get there? How many
how many
actually
get
get
there.
there?
So we actually have them do a whole math exercise, and they answer their own question, because we start looking at how many high school football players there are, how many make it to college, how many jobs are available every year in the NFL, and then I just tell them,
And they start
somebody's
thinking,
not going to
maybe,
make it.
maybe I should think of another plan.
Right, you know, and then, you know, how long does that career last? And why is it that so many of the athletes retire broke? You know, so we talk about money management and all of that. But most importantly, we deal with those topics. But again, like I said, it's interactive. So they are, you know, we're talking back and forth. I'm learning from them. I don't shut them down. I let them speak their mind. They can check me. They can challenge me, you know, and I learn from them. I really, really do, you know. So it's and it's been very rewarding. Yeah.
Back and forth. Okay, I lied. I have one more question for you.
That's okay.
Before I ask my random question, one of the things that is very important to me is, you know, we are a village, you know, and we surround our children, and it's up to us as a village to kind of to get our children through this process. And we know we all should be aware of the educational system is not designed for our children, but they still have to maneuver through it. So what are some of the best ways we can empower our children to get through this system that is not really built for them in the first place?
Parents have to be involved. Okay. Now, that may be a simplistic answer, and in some ways it may be a challenging answer, but I operate from the position that parents want what's best for their children. But I tell parents, but you've got to get involved. You got to make it happen. So parents have to get involved. I've worked with teachers for 30 years now? Yeah, over 30 years. And they will tell you that they respond differently even to the student when they know that the parent is involved. So parents have to get involved. So one of the things that, you know, like in the school district I'm down here, they do the meet the teachers, open house or whatever, you know. I think, you know, beginning of the school year, then maybe in the middle of the school year. I tell parents, at least show up for those. That's just 2 or 3 times a year. But let those teachers know that there is a parent or parents behind this child. And you be involved in your child's educational process. Because one of the things that we've always said is that parents are the primary educators of their children. So when I work with parents, what I work with them is about, you know, how can we create a learning environment in the home that's conducive to your children learning? How you can be an example for your children. You know, you don't have to have a college degree for your child or want to have a college degree, but you still need to show a life of excellence and commitment and dedication and those things, you know, no matter what it is. So parents have got to get involved, you know, because there is no magic formula. These children are out here swimming on their own, trying to navigate it, and they don't have a clue. They don't have a clue. So parents are going to have to get involved. I mean, if we want to save our children and the rest of the community, you know, that's why I am a mentor, you know, so Black men are going to have to step up. Because like you say, we have a village concept. That's really in our DNA.
Yes.
So we're going to have to bring back that village concept. The unfortunate thing, sister, is that the younger generations never had it. So they don't even, how do they restore the village concept if they never had it? So the elders are even going to have to be involved as well to help bring back that village concept, because we can't just throw our children away. That's what we've done. You know, we have thrown them out there and, like I said, asked them to swim without any support from us and to navigate their way through a hostile educational system. They can't do it. And so right now, and I'll leave you with this thought, 15% of our children in the 4th grade are reading and math proficient, you know, same thing for when they hit 8th grade. So our children are not going to make it if we don't get involved. If we don't get involved with their educational process and take control and realize that their education is our responsibility, the results are going to be what they are, because
Mhm.
no one is going to do for us what we're supposed to do for ourselves. Period.
That part. And it's such a, I'm a Gen X person, and it's disheartening to be of the generation where my elders were, you're going to college, you're going to school, you're going to go down to that schoolhouse, you're going to get you that education, to now, yeah, well,
Right.
it's such a lackadaisical
Yep.
feeling towards education. And I'm like, that's your, like you mentioned earlier, that's your liberation. And so much comes from that. Granted, yes, you might not use some of the stuff that you're being taught, but the whole process is just so very vital for your future and your livelihood.
And reading out, the last thing I want to add on the education is that reading. So if you want to talk about a specific aspect of education, if you cannot read, you're dead in the water. This is the information age. And so in an information age, you've got to know how to read. You've got to, and reading means your ability to comprehend what you read. So without the ability to read and comprehend, you are dead in the water. And it doesn't mean that everybody's not going to college, everybody shouldn't go to college, but you've got to have marketable skills. So whether it's a trade or whether it's a college degree or
even
whatever.
if you go into business, you got to sign a contract.
That's right. That's right. And so if there's one area, just talking specifically of what's going on in the classroom, our children are going through class, from grade to grade to grade, but they're not learning how to read and comprehend. And as parents, if you are not making sure that your child knows how to read, like I said again, they're dead in the water. They are, because this is the information age. And so your ability to adapt and to navigate your way through this world, you've got to know how to read.
Yes, got to be able to read, And there's so much information freely out there, so let me ask you my random question. Because we can talk here, I see. So
now the random question won't get me in any trouble or anything, right?
No.
We'll know once you ask it.
PG. Let's see what we got. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
When I was a young child, I wanted to be a lawyer.
Okay. And what happened?
I wanted to be a lawyer. Yeah, I wanted to be a lawyer. And I wanted to be a lawyer because, again, I have love for Black folks. So my reason for wanting to be a lawyer is, so down here in South Florida, there's a region in South Florida that called the Glades, where it's a migrant area. They grow a lot of the fruits and vegetables that we eat all over the country.
Okay.
But the people who worked in those fields, even when I was a child, they worked under the most deplorable conditions. They weren't paid hardly anything. And I would always, whenever someone was fighting for them to get better working rights, it was a lawyer. So so I equated law not with making a lot of money, but I equated the lawyer with the person who was fighting for those migrant workers to get some better working conditions. And so that's why I wanted to be a lawyer. Then, like I said, as I got older, I found some other means to still work to help our people, but it was all about helping our people, because I would read the newspaper and they were just fighting for them to just to be able to go to the toilet, and it would be lawyers who would be, fighting for them to get just some better working conditions. And so that's what I thought was exciting and appealing about being a lawyer.
Always a man about the community and giving back and paying for it. That is beautiful. That is beautiful. Well, sir, I've enjoyed my time with you today. I want to thank you for making time. No, let me backtrack. I want to thank you for pouring into our folks. It's just so important. And I think in our community, there's very few of us where we can look around and say, that one really just truly nothing else but loves us. That's the only motivation. That is just purely, you want to see the best for us collectively. You want to see us all empowered. And, it's just beautiful to see somebody who gives his life for that.
I thank you. And I really, it's mutual. And, we could have this love fest, but it's a mutual love fest, because what you're doing, if I can say it real quickly, is very, very valuable. And it has been an honor to be a part of this podcast. And I would just love to, or I would not love to, I will encourage our people to get involved. Because again, like we were saying, no one's going to save us for us but us. So let's get involved. I heard someone say, I forget who it was, but says no one can do everything, but everyone can do something.
That's right.
So let's get involved. Let's do something, and it'll make a difference. It'll make a difference. Even I had to learn that even if I'm making a difference in the life of one child or one parent or one man that's incarcerated, it made a difference to him or to that parent or to that child. So all of us can do something. So I hope people, will visit the website, Hattie'sChild.com, and learn more about the work, so that they can support it, and I can, reach out to them and we can keep this going. So thank you for the honor and for the opportunity.
And you do travel to other states and cities to instruct. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that is all for this week's episode of The Male Perspective. I'm your host, Lana Reed, and I will see everybody next time.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Black Men Matter series on the Male Perspective. This podcast is an initiative of Conversations in Color, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to uplifting Black voices. Make sure to check out our website, conversationsincolor.org, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platforms. We'll see you on the next episode.